You know that moment at a dinner party? It's usually around, I don't know, 11:00 p.m.
Yeah.
The wine is gone, the plates are cleared, and the conversation takes that turn. Someone leans in, looks around the table, and just drops the ultimate philosophical grenade.
Let me guess. Why is the world such a mess?
So close. They say, look, war, greed, traffic jams, people cutting in line. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
Humans are inherently selfish animals. We are. We're just wired to be bad.
Ah, yes. The wolf to man argument. It's the ultimate conversation stopper, isn't it? It basically says, don't bother trying to fix society because the hardware is broken.
Exactly. It's this idea that our default setting is competition and aggression, and civilization is just this thin, fragile crust keeping us from, eating each other. And I'll be honest, sometimes when I watch the news, I find myself nodding along to that. It feels true. But today, we are going to ask, what if that is completely wrong?
What if it's the exact opposite?
That is what we are digging into today. We are doing a deep dive into the work of Associate Professor Nevzat Evremanal. We're looking at his book, Is Human Selfish?, and his recent commentary on the sociology of crime.
And I have to say, the mission for this deep dive feels pretty high stakes.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are trying to dismantle a narrative that has been around for centuries. We're going to look at whether our modern feelings of isolation, selfishness, and even violence are biological facts hardwired into our DNA.
Or if they are engineered.
Engineered, like on purpose.
Or at least the inevitable result of a specific social design.
Okay, so are we born bad or are we made bad? To start this off, we have to look at the cultural exhibits. Exhibit A.
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies.
All right.
William Golding's novel. Most of us read this in high school. It's practically a rite of passage.
I remember reading it and just being terrified. The premise is so simple. You take a bunch of proper British schoolboys, you drop them on a deserted island with no adults, and what happens? Chaos, hierarchy, violence. They eventually turn into savages, worship a pig's head, and yeah, they start killing each other.
It's presented as this grim experiment.
Yeah.
You strip away civilization and
The beast comes out.
and it feels so plausible. But Ernal points out a massive flaw in using this as evidence of human nature.
Well, the biggest flaw is that it's fiction.
Right.
It didn't happen. It's a story made up by a man who was, frankly, deeply traumatized by his experiences in World War II. He was writing a horror story, not an anthropology paper.
But surely if that happened in real life, the result would be similar. I mean, kids can be cruel.
Actually, we have a real-world control group for this. The source material points to the story of the Tongan boys. Have you heard of this?
I hadn't until I read these notes. It's incredible.
It really is. In 1965, 6 boys from Tonga, tired of school, they steal a boat and end up shipwrecked on a deserted island called Ada.
And they were stranded there for how long?
15 months.
15 months. That is plenty of time for a Lord of the Flies scenario to play out. So do they start sharpening sticks and hunting each other?
Not even close. When they were finally rescued by a passing fisherman, they were healthy, muscular, and psychologically sound. They had set up a gym, a food garden, hollowed out tree trunks to catch rainwater. They even kept a fire going for more than a year.
But kids fight. 6 teenage boys on an island. They must have had conflicts.
Of course they did. But here's the fascinating part. In the book, conflict leads to murder.
Yeah.
On the island of Ada, when 2 boys got into an argument, they imposed a timeout.
A timeout.
Yeah. They would go to opposite ends of the island to cool off for a few hours, then come back and apologize. They survived because they instituted radical cooperation.
That is virtually the opposite of the book.
Yeah.
So why are we so obsessed with the Golding version? Why do we teach the fiction as fact in schools, but almost nobody knows about the Tongan boys?
Well, Ernal argues that this whole concept of inherent selfishness is actually a pretty new invention. It really only took hold in, say, the last 200 or 300 years.
And why then?
He suggests it became the dominant narrative because it serves a specific purpose. It justifies a specific economic system, capitalism.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you want to build a society based on ruthless competition where it's dog eat dog and the winner takes all, it is very helpful to convince everyone that being a dog is just biology.
So inequality isn't a political choice.
It's just nature taking its course.
It lets us off the hook.
Yeah.
We don't have to fix poverty because, hey, that's just the pecking order. But let me play devil's advocate here. Biology is real. Survival of the fittest is a real thing. Aren't we programmed to look out for number one to pass on our genes?
That's the common intuition. We picture early man as this, buff warrior fighting off tigers.
Right.
But let's look at the actual biology of a human being. Ernol highlights a physical reality we usually ignore because, well, we have egos. Humans are incredibly weak.
Speak for yourself. I hit the gym.
Even with the gym, compare yourself to a tiger or a bear or even a chimp. We are slow. We have no claws, no fangs. Our skin is soft. We get sunburned. We freeze without clothes.
Okay. Yeah.
If you took a human 200,000 years ago and dropped them alone in the wild, they weren't a predator. They were a snack.
Fair point. I wouldn't last an hour against a leopard. So how are we here?
We survived because we were a team. Cooperation, tool use, and language were our fangs. We didn't survive because we were the fittest individuals. We survived because we were the friendliest group.
And Onel makes a profound point about language here. This really stuck with me.
The idea that the individual is a myth.
Yeah.
In a way.
Think about it.
Yeah.
You cannot have complex language without a society to speak it with, and we use language to think. Our internal monologue is in English or Spanish or Turkish. So the solitary thinker, the idea of the individual existing apart from the group, it's impossible. Our internal software is a group project.
There was one example in the research that I found really heartbreaking, but it just drives this home perfectly. The experiment with the chimpanzee. Yeah, this is a tough one to hear. Onel discusses an experiment where a chimpanzee, our closest genetic relative, was raised in a human home, treated just like a human child.
What were they trying to prove?
They wanted to see if they could nurture the animal into being human.
And what happened? Did it start doing algebra?
No. The result wasn't that the chimp became human in terms of intelligence. The result was that the chimp became deeply social. It learned to rely on emotional connection, eye contact, comfort. It bonded.
And then the experiment ended.
Right. And this is the tragic part. They returned the chimp to a sanctuary with other chimps. They thought, okay, back to nature. But it couldn't adapt. It didn't just struggle socially. It died.
It died.
It died of sadness and depression. It had developed a need for deep social connection that, once it was severed, was fatal.
Wow. That is heavy.
It is. But it proves Onel's point. Even for our primate cousins, social connection isn't a luxury item you buy once you have food and shelter. It is a survival need. Isolation is lethal.
Okay, so if our biological baseline is cooperate or die, and we are wired for connection, how on earth did we end up here? How did we get to a world of billionaires building bunkers, massive poverty, and this every man for himself mentality?
Onel calls this the Great Split. And contrary to what a lot of people think, it didn't happen the moment we started farming.
That's usually the story, isn't it? I always thought agriculture was the villain. You plant seeds, build a fence, suddenly you have mine and yours, and boom, inequality.
It played a role, but it wasn't immediate. This is a crucial detail in the sources that often gets missed. Onel notes there is a gap, a massive gap, of roughly 1,400 years between the time we started accumulating agricultural surplus and the emergence of distinct social classes.
Wait, 1,400 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's longer than the time between the fall of Rome and today.
Exactly. For over a millennium, humans were farming, producing extra food, and not turning it into a hierarchy of kings and slaves.
So what changed? How did the split happen?
Well, imagine a grain silo. For a long time, the silo belongs to the village. Everyone puts grain in, everyone takes grain out when they're hungry. But eventually, a group within the society figures out a way to put a padlock on the silo.
And they keep the key.
Right. Society divides into two groups. Those who produce the surplus, who filled the silo, and those who seize it, who hold the key. This is the birth of the ruling class.
But how do you convince the majority of people, the ones doing the actual work, to let a small group take all the stuff?
I assume swords and spears are involved.
Force is part of it, but force is expensive. You can't stand over every single farmer with a whip 24/7. You need them to agree to the arrangement, or at least accept it as inevitable. And this is where Ernol brings in a very nuanced interpretation of religion and ideology.
This leads to that famous Marx quote, doesn't it? Religion is the opium of the masses.
Yes. Usually, people interpret that cynically. They think it means religion is a drug used to trick people, to dope them up so they don't rebel.
That's how I always understood it. A tool of control.
It became that, yes. But Onel explains that in the 19th century, when Marx wrote that, opium wasn't looked at as a recreational drug like heroin is today. It was a painkiller.
Oh.
It was the only medicine they had for severe pain. So when Marx said that, he meant that life for the oppressed class was miserable, brutal, and physically painful. Religion offered a way to cope with that suffering.
So it wasn't just shut up and work, it was suffer now, be rewarded later. A salve for the wound.
Exactly. And the ruling class utilized that coping mechanism to maintain order.
Hmm.
But you can't just promise heaven. You need to give people something in the here and now, too.
Which brings us to the Roman concept.
Bread and circuses.
A classic tactic. In Rome, you had the patricians, the super rich, and the slaves at the bottom. But in the middle, you had the plebeians. To keep the plebeians from realizing they had more in common with the slaves than the rich, the rulers gave them crumbs.
Free bread and gladiator fights.
Precisely. You give the middle layers of society just enough privilege, just enough bread, and plenty of distraction, the circus, so they feel aligned with the emperor. They identify with the guy in the golden box, not the guy dying in the sand.
And that sounds uncomfortably modern. We might not have gladiators, but we definitely have the circus.
Oh, yeah. We have endless scrolling, reality TV, celebrity gossip.
And that leads us directly to the modern era. Onal argues that our current system, capitalism, doesn't just use these distractions. It actively produces loneliness.
Produces it like a factory product.
Think about it. We are told a story from birth that we are individuals responsible for our own fate. We celebrate the self-made man.
Right.
But look at your shirt. Look at your phone. You are dependent on the labor of millions of people you will never meet.
So we are hyper-connected materially. My coffee came from Colombia, my phone from China, but we are socially isolated.
And we actively erase that connection. Ernal uses the example of Elon Musk. He is presented to us as this solitary genius, the Iron Man who does it all himself.
The ultimate self-made billionaire. He's the poster boy for if you work hard, you can do anything.
But Ernal points out the reality that's masked by the PR. His background involves family emerald mines in Africa, wealth built on extraction. And his current companies rely on thousands of engineers, factory workers, miners.
The narrative of the genius individual erases the collective effort that makes that wealth possible.
So the system isolates us. It tells us we are alone. What does that do to us psychologically?
It creates fear. And fear, my friend, is incredibly profitable. If
Yeah.
you are afraid of your neighbor, what do?
Go build a fence?
Yeah.
You get a Ring doorbell?
You move to a gated community, you buy a massive SUV so you don't have to take the bus with those people. The system creates the isolation, generates the fear, and then sells you the cure.
Consumerism isn't just about buying stuff. It's about buying safety from the scary world the system created.
Precisely. You feel empty, buy something. You feel unsafe, buy something. It turns citizens into customers of their own anxiety.
But wait, I want to pivot here. We're talking about feeling unsafe and buying alarms. But what are we actually afraid of? Usually we're afraid of crime. We're afraid of the bad guys. And the sources take a hard turn here into a specific, brutal murder case involving a teenager, the Minguez case.
This is a difficult topic, but it's essential to understanding Ernal's argument on crime.
So when a terrible crime happens, especially one committed by a kid, what is society's knee-jerk reaction?
We say that kid is a monster. We say he was born evil.
It's comforting in a way. If he's a monster, he's a different species. He's not us. We are safe.
Exactly. It individualizes the problem. But Ernal steps back. He admits that biology plays a role. He's not ignoring science. Some people are indeed born with traits like lower empathy or higher risk-taking behavior. That's a biological variation.
So there's a biological seed for trouble.
Yes, but society provides the soil. Onal describes what we can call the fork in the road. Imagine a person born with high risk tolerance and low empathy. If that person is born into a wealthy family, sent to the best schools, and given millions in capital, what do they become?
A CEO, a stock trader, a general in the army.
Exactly. They become a bold leader. Society rewards their ruthlessness. But take that same biological trait, that same risk-taking, and put it in a child born into a slum with no education, no food, and no future. What do they become?
A drug dealer, a hitman.
Biology provides the trait. Society provides the path. The criminal isn't just born, they are directed.
Okay, but this leads to a really heated debate in the source material about the term dragged into crime. There was a distinction made between a kid stealing food and a kid killing someone.
It is a crucial distinction. Ernal argues that a hungry child stealing baklava, which is a famous case in Turkey, isn't being dragged into crime. They are acting on a survival instinct. It is necessity.
But the 17-year-old acting as a hitman for a gang.
That is different. That is a child being manipulated, used, and dragged by adults into a system of violence.
But hang on. I have to push back on this. People listening to this are going to say, he's 17, he knows right from wrong, he's basically an adult, he pulled the trigger. Can we really say he was dragged? It sounds like we're removing all responsibility.
I get that reaction. It feels like excusing murder. But Ernal warns strongly against that thinking. He says if we legally declare a 17-year-old is fully an adult, fully responsible for murder, we are opening a dangerous door.
What do you mean?
If they are adults for crime, are they adults for labor? Are they adults for marriage? Can we send them to war as soldiers?
It's a slippery slope. If you lower the bar for one, you lower the bar for everything. You validate child labor and child soldiers effectively.
And we have to ask the uncomfortable question. Why does a teenager join a gang or the mafia? Ernal suggests we shouldn't just see it as evil, we should see it as rational.
Whoa, hold up. Joining a gang and killing people is rational. That sounds insane.
It sounds insane to you and me because we have options, but it is rational within their context. If you are a poor kid with absolutely no future, no education, and you see a guy with a gun, a nice car, and respect, joining him is a shortcut. It's a twisted version of tearing through the glass ceiling. It's the only career path that offers them power in a society that renders them powerless.
It's the self-made man myth again, just the dark version. The gangster is the poor man's CEO.
Exactly. And this brings up the middle class blind spot. The middle class needs to believe crime is an individual monster problem.
Why?
Because if they admit crime is caused by poverty and systemic inequality, they have to confront their own advantages.
They have to admit that their safety in the gated community is bought at the price of someone else's exclusion.
It is much easier to demand a longer prison sentence than to demand a fairer economy.
Which leads us to the solution, or the lack of one. Ernal is very clear. Punishment does not stop crime if the crime factory keeps running.
You can lock up the 17-year-old hitman, throw away the key. But if the poverty and hopelessness that created him remain, there will be another one tomorrow.
He compares our current situation to the fall of Rome, doesn't he?
Yes, the concept of decadence. Immense wealth concentrated at the very top, while the infrastructure of society rots from the inside. The rich retreat into their walled gardens, and the rest fight over the scraps. It is a sign of a dying civilization.
That is grim. So are we just waiting for the Visigoths to come sack the city? Is there a way out?
Ernal argues the antidote to this engineered selfishness is solidarity. But he gives a specific warning about how we organize.
He talks about identity politics?
He does. In the context of the murder case discussed, there were attempts to frame it as an ethnic conflict. Ernal warns that this plays right into the hands of the system.
It's bread and circuses again.
Exactly. If the working class is fighting each other over race, religion, or ethnicity, they aren't looking at the people hoarding the surplus. They aren't looking at the emperor. Real solidarity means recognizing that the struggle of a poor kid in one neighborhood is connected to the struggle of a poor kid in another, regardless of their background.
So let's try to wrap this huge topic up. We started with the question, are we selfish?
And the answer from the sources seems to be no. We are adaptable. We are biologically wired for connection, but we are living in a tank designed for sharks.
We've gone from the cooperative nature of early humans through the great split of inequality to the modern production of loneliness and fear that drives consumerism and crime.
And the takeaway is this. The next time you hear someone dismiss greed, violence, or poverty as just human nature, check the receipt. Ask who benefits from you believing that. It is a convenient lie that lets the system off the hook.
It really makes you think about your own life.
Yeah.
We spend so much energy trying to be independent, self-made, and secure behind our walls.
But maybe we are fighting our own biology. We are trying to be solitary predators when we're actually cooperative primates.
I want to leave our listener with a thought to chew on. If we accept Ernal's premise that our environment shapes our nature and our current environment is designed to make us lonely consumers,
Here's the question. Who would you be if the world was designed for connection instead of profit? What version of you is waiting for a society that actually lets it exist?
that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Take care.